Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. It's Mike Urban, and today I'm sitting with Amy Carnevale. She is the chair for the Massachusetts GOP, and I'm very excited to talk to her today. Amy, I'm happy to have you on.
Great to be with you. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
So let me ask you, the GOP here in Massachusetts, you really went out of your way to kind of turn it around. How did you manage to do this?
Well, I would say, we took some time to do it. So really, we had a long-term outlook. When I took over the party about 3 years ago now, we were at a low point. The Republican Party had lost elections, and we had no statewide offices as Republicans, no federal offices. We had lost seats on Beacon Hill. And it was a time that there was internal kind of debate and discussion within the party. And so I think we needed a leader at that time that was more about focusing on some of the internal metrics of the party and rebuilding for the future. So the first year was really not to get involved in kind of this inter-party squabbles, really just talk about the Democrats and get our messaging down and focus on some of the mechanics of party meetings and, getting back to regular order of meeting as a party, having committees within our state committee in Massachusetts. We have an 80-member state committee, really getting functioning committees up and running again so that we're empowering members of the state committee to take ownership over things like communication, candidate recruitment, because we can't do it alone. We have a small staff at the party. And then really just talking about the Democrats and their policies on Beacon Hill. So it's really been kind of a strategic plan over the last 3 years. And I feel like now we're really at a point that we're focused for the future and actually, running candidates ahead of the 2026 election. We're recruiting and running candidates, training them. And, we're really, I think, have the experience now to step forward and make some big strides. Right.
It's like putting the cart before the horse problem, right? You got to get all your, your internal, what's happening internally under wraps in order to, provide clarity, I guess, for future candidates and the future of the party.
That's right.
Yeah. And how has turnout been for future candidates?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about recruitment. So early this year, we held a series of recruitment and training seminars throughout Massachusetts. We had initially envisioned we would do 2 or 3 throughout, kind of regionally located in the state. And those were aimed primarily at some of the town elections. So really kind of building the bench for the future, getting in Republicans elected to some of these town offices with the idea that they could then run in a couple of years for legislative seats. So it's really a long-term future of building the bench. So we're thinking we would do 2 or 3 throughout the state. The response that we had from communities and from Republicans was tremendous. We heard from Republican town committees saying, "Hey, can you do another one in our area? Can we help sponsor one?" Gloucester said, "We'll hold it. We'll arrange the venue if you can provide the speakers, and we could do one there." So we ended up doing 7 throughout the state, and each one had between, I would say, 40 and 80 people. Not all candidates. Some town committee members, people working with candidates, wanting to help recruit candidates, but all good. And we did actually get some candidates out of those seminars too that then went on to run for local office successfully. So I felt like that was a real bellwether for the future. We have more candidates looking again either to run in city elections this fall or legislative seats next year.
Gotcha. So you feel like, you attend a lot of these, so you feel like there's a lot of positivity happening for the GOP in Massachusetts.
Yeah, absolutely. Too often in the past, you go to some of these meetings and, it's kind of the same cast of characters complaining about what goes wrong, a lot that we could be doing differently, and sure, there's always room for improvement, but the mood and tenor at these events felt a lot different this spring, and it still feels different. People are excited. They want to make change. Some of that might be Donald Trump, that they feel like kind of that's put a wind in their fire, or in their sails, and that they really feel empowered to try to bring some of that change here in Massachusetts, and the way that kind of the Trump coalition is talking to Republicans and independents in Massachusetts is a lot different than the Republican Party in the past. So I think people feel like they want to be part of it.
Yeah, I see that too, because I've obviously gone to a few different events here and there, and it seems like everybody is really, they feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Where before, it kind of feels like you can't even see the tunnel. You're not even in the tunnel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in terms of, just the general voters, what's your gauge on, because you get a lot of community feedback and stuff like that too at these. Well, how have they been?
They're open hearing our message.
Yeah.
For sure, two of the biggest issues that continue to be in Massachusetts is immigration and the economy. I think about a year ago, I would have ranked immigration number one and the economy number two. I think that perhaps that's flipped today. Maybe the economy is number one, immigration number two, and that's likely due to Donald Trump and the reduced number of immigrants coming into Massachusetts, but of course still remains a problem for our fiscal wallet in Massachusetts in terms of spending. But the economy, you think about that next generation, people graduating college in Massachusetts, it's hard to strike out on your own and to be able to afford to buy a house. Even rents, it's hard to find an apartment that's affordable. It's hard to pay for groceries. So that next generation, as well as just like everyday working Americans in Massachusetts, they're not feeling that the Democratic Party is delivering for them on Beacon Hill. There's certainly lots of promises that are made, but very little action and very little being delivered.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And the other thing is, and this extends outside of Massachusetts in general, is what is the message of the Democrats right now? I think they're like speed running their way to single-digit approval ratings, it feels like. They're doing everything in their power to try to get to a single digit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really wild. And when you think about it, you see what's happening throughout the country, and then we're in this little bubble here, right? It feels that way, right? All this stuff is happening outside of the state, and then we're just in this bubble where a lot of the voters, in my opinion, I've talked about this before, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like a lot of the voters are scared. They're either scared to talk Republican, or should I go Democrat, or what they're going to do. And I feel like they get disenfranchised a lot. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of animosity, I feel like, between coworkers, friends, and family, because we're such a deep blue entrenched state that a lot of people are scared to speak up. And I've been trying to reinvigorate that feeling of hey, it's okay, there's other people like you out there. And do you feel that way too?
I do, but I actually think it's changing. I
Yes.
feel like compared to a couple of years ago, it's changed today. I feel like people are a little bit more open to say what they believe here in Massachusetts today, as compared to a couple of years ago. But I know in my community, I talk to conservative individuals who are either small business owners or realtors, and they've been afraid to kind of make their views known for being shunned by the community, and I think that's changing a little bit. I think having people like you and others kind of talking openly about views and knowing they're not alone kind of gives them some comfort in standing up and saying what they believe.
And it's a really crazy dynamic too, because when you think about it, it's like they're enslaved to this idea that their politics, especially if they're a business owner, right? That their politics is going to, stray away potential customers or whatever it is. And to a point, I listen, I get it. I understand. But what we are talking about here is when you really dial it back, right? And look from the outside in, it's like people shouldn't be you shouldn't be scared of something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely crazy to me that somebody actually has to be scared to voice their opinion on something. Like, they're not going to get, their inheritance money or something like that from their family if they don't vote blue, no matter who. It's insane.
I just point out, I mean, the irony is, on the left, they kind of preach tolerance and say that, they're the tolerant ones and Republicans are less tolerant, but yet they're not tolerant of another point of view. And so, that's the irony of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's the diversity of ideas. This is where they come to die, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So in regards to the message, we kind of know, and we could, talk about the Democratic message as well, or the Democrats' message for that matter. But what would you say to future voters? What sort of message is the GOP trying to bring to Massachusetts for the future?
Yeah, so I think, again, bringing that back to the economy is really important, that we want to be the party that delivers on fiscal responsibility. In Massachusetts, we have become one of the least affordable state for families to live in. Least affordable. I mean, that's terrible. So that's really important, thinking about future generations. Another issue that's really critical for everybody in Massachusetts is kind of accountability and transparency. And when we think about the way Beacon Hill operates, it's one of the least transparent, least accountable legislatures in the nation. I mean, again, the irony of a legislature that's dominated by kind of the far left liberals being less transparent, less accountable, holding votes behind closed doors, no public access, no access for the media, very little kind of freedom of information, act in court inquiries, and of course the governor, exempts herself when she said it during her campaign that she would, provide more accountability. So, we're a state that provides, so little transparency and accountability. And Republicans have shown that, those are values that they stand for and that they believe in. And you think about the audit of the legislature, that passed. Over 70% of the voters approved of this ballot measure to audit the legislature. And yet the legislature has basically, just put up their hand and said, nope, we're not going to comply.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And the governor says nothing. The attorney general says nothing. And, so what's the recourse? Our auditor is going to have to sue. I mean, it's in any other state in the nation, this would just be held out by, kind of the mainstream media as just being, a legislature that is just abandoned any kind of rule of the law. And but yet somehow they do write about it a little bit, but they kind of wink and a nod, it's kind of let them get away with it, and they do get away with it. And so our job as Republicans, and my job as a Republican leader, is to try to remind voters when it comes time for elections, like, remember, these are the people who are not going along with, this vote of over 70%, to audit themselves. What are they hiding? And there needs to be more accountability. And even just adding to the number of Republicans, we know we have a long way to go to be in the majority, but if we can get to the point where we can at least sustain a veto from a Republican governor, that's a big step forward, and that can help influence policies. And we can... adding to our numbers of Republicans, we can demand increased accountability.
The crazy thing about the audit is that not only did it not pass, and everybody, over 70%, as you said, of the voters here wanted the audit, but they're doing everything in their power to not only not let the audit happen, but I guess they hired some secret attorney or like something like that. And, it's just how many times, for the people watching, I feel like a lot of people feel disenfranchised, but then they vote the same way.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be a change.
Yeah.
And I think that people just need to wake up to the fact that if they're feeling disenfranchised, do your due diligence, do your research. And that's one of the biggest issues that I have in terms of politics. I don't know everything about politics. And the reason that I think a lot of people are scared to vote one way or the other, or then they don't vote at all, is because the barrier to entry to learn about a candidate, or you really got to be in the weeds, in my opinion. You know what I mean? You really got to be in the weeds. And the fact remains is like, if people want to keep having high energy bills, less transparency, less accountability, the fiscal budget is insane. Illegal immigration is out of control. Like, these are common problems that I feel as though the Republican Party wants to attempt to solve.
Yeah.
But on the other side, these are not problems in terms of the Democratic Party. Like, it's just insane to me. So with that being said, is that stuff that would you say the GOP is kind of advocating for? Cheaper, housing, cheaper, energy, just the cost of living here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the way down the line, cost of living. And, when you think about energy, the green energy transmission costs that the governor tax on, or her administration tax on to people's bills. I mean, we really saw that this winter. And with subsidizing the green energy is just not working for residents here in Massachusetts. And it's making us less competitive, and it's making it less affordable to live here. I mean, sure, everybody in Massachusetts is in favor of, in theory, green energy or in the environment, and doing things in
till it comes to their doorstep.
But you got to live too, and so that's where the balance is. And clearly, they've gone too far to one side. If people can't even afford to live here and pay their bills,
it's crazy. I saw a bill the other day. It was. There was no usage charge, but the delivery charge was like $20-some for zero usage. Usage.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. And I just saw New Hampshire. Up in New Hampshire, they're going to be getting hit with higher bills up there too. Yeah. It's like, how long can New England sustain? Because obviously most of New England is Democratic, right? So like, how long are the voters going to continue to vote the same exact way and get the same exact results?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to me. It's one thing that like really pushes me to continue to do what I do, because I look at these things and I think to myself, like, am I wrong? Am I looking at these the wrong way, or is this the way that it is? Yeah. And it is the way that it is.
It is the way that it is, and obviously people are listening to you because they're agreeing with you and they want to hear more discussion about this, and I think they're open to hearing that message. Because they're not getting it other places. Yeah,
it's funny. I got an Uber the other day in the North End, and I was on the phone with my sister. And I got off the phone. The Uber driver goes to me. He goes, do you have a YouTube channel? And I said, I do. I said, why? He goes, well, he's like, I emailed you. And I said, what did you email me on? And he said it was about, I guess there was a lawsuit with Uber or something like that, and they still haven't been paid. But the fact remains, like, I'm in the middle of, not in the middle of nowhere, I'm in the middle of the North End. But, the message is starting to catch on. And it's just amazing to see so many like-minded people that probably have been thinking this way for so long. But they've also been disenfranchised for so long for their friends and family that at least there's like some common ground that they could come to, So what would you say, is there anything that Democrats have done right in the last few years?
That's a good question.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, you have put me on the spot. Well, they've been winning elections. I guess so they have that in their corner.
Yeah.
I think sometimes they try to speak to the emotional side of people. Yeah. And Republicans don't do that as well. So maybe I'd say that that's one thing that I think we can learn from.
Yeah, I think so too. But there's also there's like the emotional side to things, but then there's the I don't know if it's logical. I don't know if that's the right word to use here. But like, if you take illegal immigration, for instance, right? I think, and I've said this before, I think that for the most part, a lot of people were putting their emotion behind supporting certain people, right? And then what had happened is, another year goes by, budget keeps on getting bigger and bigger, spending keeps on getting more and more.
Right.
And then people sit down, like emotion could only go so far.
Right.
You know what I mean? Emotion is good for short term, but it's not good for long term.
Yeah, that's a great example. So when you think about Governor Healy and the high school senior, the lacrosse player, so that's an excellent example. Of course, she's there for the photo op and the meeting, and that he was confined for a number of days while they sorted out his situation. And clearly, he was here illegally. His father was as well, and apparently, I believe it was reported that his father may have also violated another law while he was here as well, so that he was the target. I think most citizens of Massachusetts would agree, okay, this situation, maybe we should have some compassion here. He's, this kid has been in high school. He's been here since he was very young and his siblings were born here. So maybe we should think about having compassion. But again, the larger issue of the migrants coming in to Massachusetts, and really we served as a state that was drawing them in because of the unlimited benefits, at the expense of citizens who have lived here all their lives. And so it's not a zero-sum approach. I mean, somebody is paying these bills, and whether it was the shelter, whether it was the food, the Ubers, we heard Uber Eats, the iPads, the phones, the emergency services, the healthcare. So, the benefits kind of went on and on and on. And Massachusetts became one of the few states that would provide all those benefits. And yet you think about low-income seniors in communities that are on, have been on waiting lists for years for affordable housing. You think about veterans who have, served our country and lots of needs as well. And they're getting pushed aside for these migrants. So that's the dichotomy that I think the Democrats, don't think about kind of the big picture, and thinking, okay, from a policy standpoint, what is the policy that we should have in Massachusetts? And they're very reactionary to these individual stories.
You're right about being reactionary, and that's another thing I talk about. And they're more reactive versus proactive here.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like they let all these things happen, and then they try to come up with a solution.
Right.
But the damage is already done.
Exactly.
The damage is done. And the fact is like you have some people screaming from the rooftops like, hey, this is the percent chance that something like this is going to happen, and they ignore that information. Yeah. And then on top of that, to bring up the student, it's like not only does the GOP, the GOP is in a position where they are, they're kind of the underdog in the state, right? Just call it like it is.
Yeah.
But not only that, but all of the legacy media here is completely against anything that they do. Yeah. When was the last time you saw something positive about the GOP and legacy media here? Yeah. Like, they'll write about it, but it'll be the narrative of the article or the narrative of the story or whatever it is will disenfranchise them as well.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So the question I get asked in a situation like that is with a kid is, okay, do Republicans support, deporting this high school kid? How would you handle it? So it's not addressing the bigger picture. It's kind of a gotcha question.
Yeah, of course.
The way it gets framed.
Well, and the fact is like, it's rules. Like the rules are for certain people and not for others, right? Like the reason things were created is so that people could follow the rules, right? I mean, it is what it is. Yeah. But it's a really crazy circumstance. Yeah. So if you were, let me ask you this question, right? In terms of the amount of money that a candidate has or is able to collect, right? It's about $1,000, right?
Right.
That's not that common throughout the country, is it?
No, it's not common at all.
Yeah. So why do you think that there's something going on here?
So a couple of things. I think there are people kind of these, I would say, sometimes they cast themselves as kind of pro-democracy or good guy kind of groups out there in Massachusetts that think, okay, well, money is a dirty thing in elections, and so we should limit it. The fact of the matter is, there's free speech and the ability of individuals to support candidates in causes that people believe in. I mean, that's a constitutional right of Americans. So what you've had happen here in Massachusetts is because of that $1,000 limit, we've seen the proliferation of the super PACs. And under super PACs, you don't know who's giving money for what purpose. And so there's much less transparency in influencing elections with the money going into super PACs. And furthermore, they're not under the law. They're not supposed to be controlled or coordinated with campaigns and candidates directly. It would be much better if the limits were increased, both for candidates as well as for state parties. So the limit for our state party, the Massachusetts and the Democratic State Party, is $5,000 for state elections from an individual per year as well. I will say the director of the Office of Political and Campaign Finance, he's proposed legislation that would double the limits, both for the parties. It would go from 5 to 10. And for individual campaigns from 1 to 2. That's not gone he's had it out there a couple of years now, a few years. It's not gone anywhere on Beacon Hill, but that would be a start. And, I talked to some of my colleagues, state party chairs from other parts of the country, and they're just amazed. I was talking about one of our successful fundraising events this spring, and, said that, we've committed, we raised over $200,000, and they were like, oh, that's great. How much of that was corporate money? I said, we don't take corporate money in our state. That's banned. Yeah. No corporate money. He's like, well, how did you raise the money? And I was like, that's individual phone calls, like one-on-one, call. Yeah. And he's like, wow, okay, like that's amazing. So this was a state that takes corporate dollars, and I'm not advocating for that, but it's just making the point that Massachusetts, the limits are very restrictive here, which kind of forces campaigning to be conducted in a less transparent way. So these people advocating for these low limits, they already
have war chests.
Yeah, and they're doing a disservice. They're actually making the situation worse from what they claim to support.
Yeah, because if you're going against another candidate that's already in office, they already have money. In a war chest, basically, right?
Right, and so that's the other side of it, too. It makes it harder to displace incumbents, so that the Democratic Party and incumbents, they have the majority of office, and so they don't want to make it easier for those who want to displace them, whether it be other Democrats or Republicans, frankly.
It's crazy. It just seems like no matter what angle that you take, there's significant amounts of roadblocks put in what I would think is pretty strategically to not have a change of hands here, right? At least it feels that way to me.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, before we went on air about redistricting and the congressional districts. And I mean, that's another example where the Democrats, they control the entire process here in Massachusetts, both for the legislative seats as well as the congressional seats. And they draw it completely to their advantage and the advantage of their incumbents. And, whoever is kind of in favor for their incumbents, they'll work with them to draw the lines, how they want, and that's the way it is. And Republicans have zero say in that process.
Yeah, it's my feeling on the entire thing, but it's that is another layer of basic bureaucracy, right? Of just nonsense that if they decide to she was just talking about, Maura Healey was just talking about that today. Yeah, and I saw it. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are they going to redistrict? what are they going to redistrict? The state is like primarily blue.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would love the opportunity. If she wanted to redistrict, I would talk to her about that all day long, because it's drawn to such their advantage. I mean, where the term gerrymandered was coined in Massachusetts, and we're a prime example of why that's the case. I mean, President Trump brought it up as well. I mean, our House seats are entirely gerrymandered. I've actually had serious Republicans talk to me about whether we could challenge the congressional districts legally. There was a window in 2021, right after the census and redistricting, where you were supposed to. That was before I was party chair, to do it, and it wasn't done then. But it's frankly, given these discussions and given the White House interest, I'm kind of taking a fresh look at that too. And I'd love an opportunity to look at the district lines. If Maura Haley wants to do it, I say bring it on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I again talk about this often, is like, the state has gone so far for so long in one direction. And well, actually, let me follow that up with a question. Do you think that the Republican Party is aligned? I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you think that they're more aligned with the working class, the middle class families than Democrats are?
I do. I do. And I think that's a change. And we talked about it a little bit in the beginning. Like, I think Donald Trump has really kind of changed that alignment. And I think today the Republican Party is more aligned with the working class, middle class.
Yeah.
Across the country.
I think so too. I think that, I don't know everything, but the parties themselves, meaning the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, you could go back, 15, 20 years ago, the parties are much different than they are today. Mm-hmm. And, everything that, at least on a, not only a state level, but also nationally, a lot of the values that the Democrats are trying to push down people's throats, I feel like it just doesn't align with what working class Americans, people that here in America that they want. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and it's a really crazy dynamic to me, because again, you see all of these things happening outside of Massachusetts. Our budget is increasing. We have all this stuff going on the back end. And then you could look to other states, like North Carolina, like Florida, like Texas, that are getting all of this investment money, that are getting all, I'm not saying everything is good everywhere. Yeah. I'm just saying that from the perspective of here versus somewhere else, like, why would somebody want to stay here? I feel like people come here, they go to school here, they figure out that they could get a job, but they can't afford to live in the state that they went to school and they got a job in, and then they're out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
too many people.
And I'm in real estate. So, I mean, like, I see this happening, right? Like, I see this happening. And it's unfortunate because, it's very costly to go to school here. And then you could get a decent job and you still can't afford to make a living here.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And something needs to, I'm telling you, something needs to be drastically done about this. I talked about this the other day. I've been talking about this for 3, maybe even 4 months. So what they did, Maura Healey changed things in regards to inspections in Massachusetts for buying a home. Then they went ahead and they did the broker bill. Okay, where the landlords are no longer paying, tenants are no longer paying their agent effectively, right? Now, I just saw on the Globe, it was either today or yesterday, that they want to reintroduce rent control. Mm-hmm. So I said all of these things are going to happen because, and this is the follow-up question, it feels to me like when you give the Democratic Party an inch, they take 10 miles.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they'll go to every single extreme. And I don't know if is this like calculated? Like, are they calculating these things? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I don't think so. But I think, I have heard from Democrats that say, great job, Amy. The Republican Party is more robust and finally you're kind of finding your voice. And that helps us kind of keep away the crazies, so these are like more moderate Democrats. And they're like, because without Republicans in the room or Republicans having a voice effectively, they succumb to their fringe elements in the far left side of any policy proposal. And it's almost like, I feel like there's some of them that know it's not the right solution, but they can't say no, because they consider it their base, and their base come and ask for these kind of loony proposals, and and they just can't say no to it, and so that so they enact it, they go along with it, and. So that's why we need more Republicans. But you're right. It's a fundamental shift. And I do think, looking ahead to 2026, we talked a little bit about that. Like, it's a critical election here in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. If we think about where we were just a few short years ago with outgoing Governor Baker and the surplus, the rainy day fund that he left, the economy was in great shape, even coming in, we could talk about COVID, but that's probably a whole show in and of itself. But he left a rainy day fund, and by and large policies that people were happy with here in the state. And that's just been kind of burnt through by the Democrats in the legislature. And, we're charted for a course of, further economic woe here in Massachusetts. And you're right, people are leaving. The millionaire's tax, which I don't really usually like to call millionaire's tax, it's graduated tax, really. They're talking about now having putting in place, doing a ballot initiative for an additional tax on wealthy individuals. It's like, okay, like at what point, do you want to, lose these people in Massachusetts? I mean, these are people who are wealthy enough that they can. And I, dealing as party chair, I make fundraising calls. Like, I keep coming across more individuals say, I've gone down to Florida a month and a day or 6 months in a day. They may still have a condo in Boston, and their business is here, but they're living in Florida. They're operating it remotely, and that's lost tax revenue for Massachusetts. And
it could be a short-term win. But it's a longer-term deficit is basically
right.
what it is.
Exactly
because that money's volatile.
Yeah, exactly right. So short-term, maybe a year or two, they're collecting more money, but at the longer term, you're losing those entrepreneurs, you're losing the successful people in Massachusetts.
And not only are we losing them, but, Mike Keneally brought this up too. He said, based on his business, background, like the higher the more bloated a state's budget is becoming, the more likely it is for businesses to not come to that state, because that's like kind of a benchmark, I guess, right? So if you have a budget that keeps on expanding and expanding and expanding, and things are becoming less and less affordable, why would business want to move into the state?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So not only do we have wealthy people leaving that perhaps may have businesses, but now we also have the effect of businesses not wanting to move to the state.
Right.
So it's like twofold. Like,
That's
are people not seeing these things? Like, when I look at these things, I think to myself, like, the writing is on the wall.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes I think I'm the crazy one, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think to myself, like, is there something I don't know? Am I missing a piece of the puzzle? But I don't think I am. I just think that they're kind of riding this wave for as long as humanly possible. But I'll tell you what, I feel like there's a huge opportunity in 2026. If things don't change, at least slightly in 2026, I would be very surprised, because the more and more people that I talk to, because again, remember, a lot of people that watch the channel are on both sides of the aisle and in the middle too. And a lot of people are switching over from Democrat to Republican because they feel like the Democrats, at least here, are not working in their best interest.
Right.
And it's really amazing to see. And those are the type of people that we need on our side, because those are the ones that actually have a voice or want to use their voice for that matter. Let me ask you this. What is your roadmap? Do you have like a roadmap to grow the GOP even further?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've identified just in the last couple of months the legislative seats that where Donald Trump received either over 40% or over 45% of the vote. So those are the seats that we are targeting for recruiting strong candidates and being competitive. So both state Senate, state rep seats, and in some of those seats we already have candidates, and then in others we're looking for candidates. So, and we're doing the hard work of, talking to, reaching out to our Republican town committee chairs, or reaching out to kind of chamber presidents, whoever is active in those communities, and just talking to people and say, who would you like, rather than letting, because I think too often in the past the Republican Party is, we're a small operation. They would just relied on people just to raise their hand, and they get on the ballot, and maybe they're not necessarily the candidate with the broadest appeal in that district. So we want to talk. We're taking the time to talk to maybe neighboring legislators to say, you have a state senate, you're a state rep, there's a state senate seat that's held by a Democrat. This is a prime opportunity for us to pick up. Who do would you like to, we think you'd be a great candidate, but if not you, who would make the most sense? And really thinking strategically about who the candidates are, and then having those conversations to go to them and say, we think tell them why we think this is a great year to run, and ask if they consider it. And then too often in the past, I think some people who would consider running as Republicans just felt like it was a lost cause. And so even though they agreed with us in principle, they just felt that either they couldn't win, they couldn't be successful, or if they're business owners, maybe they'd lose business as a result. But as we talked about earlier, that's changing, and so I think we're seeing more serious people. People are known in the community, operating businesses, coaching little league teams, like really saying, okay, enough's enough. I care about the future of my community and what's going on here in Massachusetts, and I'm going to run.
I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of like people that are waking up to this, to what's going on, and they have to be. And I talk about this as like, every single day we're all just chipping away. You know what I mean? Just chipping a little bit away. Educating more people and just trying to get them to see what is actually happening behind the scenes. Because unless you know, you don't know. And it's much easier to be naive, right? Like it's much easier to not want.
You almost wish sometimes you didn't know what you know, right?
Yeah. Sometimes that's better, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? But then once you're kind of in tune to what is actually happening, and you see through that veil, because all the press releases are like, oh, we did this and we did that. But then when you start to read the fine print, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't look too pretty.
I just want to interject here and say, like, I do think shows like yours are really helping with that effort too.
Thank you.
Because, the mainstream media, the legacy media, they weren't talking about that. And so now, we've seen a shift in having, we'll see you or somebody like you cover these issues in depth. And it's really, and then the Mass GOP or another organization puts out a press release and really calls attention to it. And then that's forcing the mainstream media sometimes to pick up your messaging too. And they're not always giving you guys credit like they should, but at least, now they're covering it and they're being forced to cover it, which is great to see.
I got a perfect example of that, by the way. So about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I had released a video in regards to the Massachusetts State Police training. My attorney sent a FOIA request out to get, it was a training on hate speech. Did you see this video?
I didn't see the video. I heard about it though.
So this was in regards to labeling Moms for Liberty as a hate group in Massachusetts. 2.5 weeks later, what's it called? Daily Wire releases an article. Did you see this?
I did see the Daily Wire article.
So Daily Wire releases the article, doesn't give any mention of my name. That released this 2.5 weeks ago. Then Fox News picked it up. Then there was a Daily Caller picked it up. Like all these different, and the fact is, am I upset that they didn't mention my name? I am a little bit, but that is, I would say, overshadowed by the fact that if I feel as though, and I could be wrong, but I feel like if I didn't bring that up, I don't think it would have got any coverage. As a matter of fact, I don't even think the Globe or the Herald, I don't even know if any local stations have covered this yet.
I agree. I don't think they have.
I don't think they have.
And so I interviewed yesterday morning with Fox talking about the redistricting issue. We were talking about Senator Warren and the endorsement of Mandami. We had a lot to talk about. But so we talked about that. But the segment just before me was about Moms for Liberty in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And so I was like, wow. Okay, like I could have talked about that too, but that's you're
but the impact. It's not about like the credit would have been nice, but it's about the impact.
Right.
The same thing happened when I did the video with the EverSource stuff that was going on. Nobody was covering that. Then all of a sudden, a week and a half later, it became a problem.
Right.
And you think to yourself like, when you like go out and then look in, it's like you think to yourself, would this stuff even be newsworthy for our legacy media to even like it's obviously newsworthy to the voters, to the citizens of the state,
right?
But when you have legacy media not even picking up on these things, it's very surprising to me.
And I'll say, there's other issues. Like I would say the first year or two, when I was party chair, like we try to bring to the legacy media, and we would think is similar type of issues that really should be a big issue, and they're just like, I don't think we're going to write about that, and so we're like, okay, but so it's refreshing now that we have an outlet that is open to looking at things differently and talking about those issues that
and we have we have Jess Machado. You were on her show the other day, so shout out to Jess. I was on there too. The more people Like I don't have a monopoly on this.
Yeah.
Neither does Jess, neither does Jack Gately. Anybody that wants to do this and voice their opinion, you know what I mean? The state is hungry. The people of the state are hungry for this information because I think they're kind of sick of getting spoon-fed, the same old narrative, the same old information that makes it look like it's all rainbows and unicorns, and it's not.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a hard one, okay? I got a list. I'm going to actually ask you a question that I have on a list here. So how would you start? What would your approach be to potentially balancing the budget? What do you think that would entail?
Well, first of all, you have to start with a review of the existing programs. I feel like almost every program in Massachusetts, you could look for efficiencies.
Yeah.
In talking to people who work at various agencies, they've never been asked to do more with less. They've never been asked to identify their savings. So that's, one general approach is you ask the heads of agencies, if you had to cut 5% from your budget, where would you find that? Immediately, most budgets in Massachusetts are budgeted on increases every year. So instead of an increase, either hold harmless. There's some programs that perhaps where people with disabilities rely on, okay, fine, we'll hold them level, but certainly could probably find even some efficiencies there to hold level rather than increase because you have to do pay increases. But then look at other programs, 5%, ask those agency heads, identify 5%. They know their programs the best. They know what's going to hurt the least, and come back to us or maybe give us a range of options, cut 2%, 5%, 10%, tell us how you would do that. And then as an executive, you make the decision, okay, what does this look like and where can we save money going forward? So, that's one approach. And have conversations with not only people in government, outside of government that work with government, rely on government about what they see as well. Yeah.
Now, under Charlie Baker, this is one thing that I've noticed. So our government here has grown exponentially.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Over the last couple of years.
Crazy. Just the last,
it's insane.
Yeah, it is.
And
exponential growth.
Yeah, and they're generating all of these weird positions, to put it lightly, and these coalitions and this and this and this. And I don't have the metrics in my brain. I can't remember everything. But I remember looking at the chart and it was here for Charlie Baker, and it was here for Maura Healey. And I think that, I hate to use this as an example, but this is happening throughout the entire culture of America. Okay. You could look at the entertainment industry. You could look at social media. You could look at all these different mediums. And what's happening is these businesses are consolidating because and you put it the best. You said, do more with less, right? Microsoft just laid off 9,000 people.
Yeah.
Look at what happened when Elon Musk bought Twitter. Yeah. He cut off 80% of the staff.
Right.
And as far as I know, it's still operating the same way that it was with 80% more staff.
Right.
So why does our local government have to be fiscally irresponsible, create these ridiculous groups or these ridiculous jobs for these people and spend more money? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
When you think even on the local level, like my hometown, they were hiring for a DEI coordinator for the school system of I think it was around $100,000. Is that really necessary for a small town?
It's crazy.
Yeah, for just the school district, shouldn't we have an HR person? Can't they take care of that? Or but it's rethinking some of the assumptions that people have made in the past, that we can do more for less. And you think about AI and technology. Do we need all the buildings? The state level, do we need that we've had in the past? And, so kind of questioning everything, frankly, is,
I feel like really the state is losing the fabric of it feels different. And a lot of people on my channel comment about this too, that, they grew up here, they moved, they came back to visit, and, they're going through Boston or they're going through their homes, and just everything is just so much different than it used to be. And I think people really want to get back to that more, reserved, let's say, conservative or traditional, I think there's a lot of people that still want that. Like, it's okay to be, look, I'm 40 years old, like, technology and stuff like that and looking towards the future, that's okay. But when you take this, like, this progressive agenda and just push it as far as humanly possible, I just don't think it's at the end is going to be a net positive for the majority of the people throughout the state. And the fact is like, you could do a lot more with less. And my dad always taught me less is more, right? So it's like painting a wall. Like, you could just throw the paint on the wall or like coat your brush or whatever and it'll look terrible, or you could take your time and do a coat after coat after coat. And it's just, that's how it feels to me, right? The legislature just feels like they're throwing everything at the wall and they're seeing what sticks. Do you think that they're just like beholden to these progressive ideas?
I do. It's so reactionary. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Like, when an issue hits the news, like all of a sudden, okay, well, let's start a program. Let's throw $10 million at this, $100 million at this. And like, without even thinking through, like, do we actually need that program, or is there another program that can handle that? Like, and so that's their answer is you create a program, you throw money at it. And, that just seems like that's been done again and again and again.
It just keeps on getting recycled and recycled. And the crazy thing is there's so many, like, there's opportunities out there for the people that have been, disenfranchised here in terms of like, they're in the emergency shelter. There's so many buildings that are just sitting and rotting in Massachusetts, like these historic buildings. And the state doesn't do anything with them. But meanwhile, they're putting like, they could create like some kind of like technical school or something like that, or, do something positive for these communities. And before I finish that, let me just say one more thing. What are your thoughts on, I just thought about this. There's so many towns here that are behind on budget. So many. It's like over 50, right, that are looking for overrides. I know this is not this is a long-standing problem. How does this keep happening? Where these towns, they can't balance their budgets and, they have to cut staff, or they have to do this or they have to do that. At what point, you think to yourself, you were just throwing around $10 million or $100 million. At what point does the governor step in and say, hey, let's start? Charity starts at home, right? Let's fix what's going on within our state and then go out from there. You know what I mean? It's wild to me.
We did analysis early on at the party about, I think, when the migrant spending was kind of first, hitting the news and what was being spent on the shelter system, and we kind of divided it up by school district and what that would mean if we didn't have the shelters and we're sending it to like every school district. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was around like $9,000 or $10,000 per school district. Do you think like that's a lot of money for a school district? Like every single school district in Massachusetts, like, and that's not just towns, but every
and that's just the money
exactly.
You're probably not even calculating. Totally. You're not even calculating the back end money, like health insurance and SNAP benefits, EBT, all this other stuff, right? You're calculating solely. That's the biggest misconception that a lot of people, and I'm sure somebody on a national level will talk about this one day. I've already talked about this, but the front end spending is potentially less than what the back end spending is. It's a lot. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't get this or get that, but like, when there's people that have been living here for so long that aren't even getting these things that people that, never came here before are now getting or they're privy to. You think to yourself, like, how do we get here?
The other thing I'll say too is, local aid is really important. So that's the fund that the state has to help pay for the roads and everything else that municipalities have to pay for. And that is an important function that the state has in helping our small towns and communities, kind of pay for infrastructure. And when they start these new programs, potentially that takes away from local aid. So certainly that needs to be a priority for state government.
Let me ask you this question too. How do you think the GOP, there's a lot of independents in Massachusetts.
Oh yeah. Over 60%.
Over 60%. That's a lot. How do you think that what do you think they're looking for in order to?
I think they're looking for common sense and just people. I think they're looking for candidates that, are open, not from either fringe and just, open to common sense government and just, kind of good people that want to do the right thing in office. And so, I mean, that's why you've seen, elections where you see a Republican governor elected by a high margin, and at the same time you've seen a Democratic senator also elected too. So I guess that speaks to a little the dichotomy of the voter in Massachusetts. So that they like personalities too. So. I'm really looking forward to the 2026 election. And, some people say, obviously, we do have a primary in the gubernatorial on the Republican side. And people say, oh, that's terrible. You can't get behind one candidate. But I think it's two things. One, it speaks to the weakness of the incumbent in Maura Healey, that you have competent Republicans who have been successful in their own right, know about state government, stepping up and wanting to lead. And also just having that enthusiasm on the Republican side of a primary will be exciting in talking about ideas and getting those ideas out there. So
I think it's important to for people to realize, a lot of the people that are running, they don't need to run. You know what I'm saying? For especially for governor, they don't have to run for governor.
Right.
So you see all these people coming into the chamber, and it's like, they must really and truly feel like something is broken.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel.
Yeah.
You feel like something is, like you're here and like we like this state and we know what the state could be, but these people have to truly feel like something is broken.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would they run?
That's true. I've talked to every one of them, either in the race or thinking about getting in, and they do believe that, like really deep down, that it is broken. And
they're very passionate.
Yes.
Like everybody you talk to, like they're passionate, because it's easy to have passion for something that absolutely needs change, and it here. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's why so many people are kind of, at least from what I see, and maybe I'm in an echo chamber, but I don't think I am. So many people are excited to be a part of this, I think. You know what I mean? Like they a part of change to a point, right?
Right.
Because I think the majority of people, like, people say, oh, we hate it here, we hate this, we hate that. But like, I don't think they actually, I just don't think that they realize what the quality of life can be if things were run efficiently versus the way that they're being run today.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
One thing I wanted to ask you, so from the 2020 election, this is federal for presidency, right? We had an enormous amount of Republican votes come out of Massachusetts. It was upwards of almost, was it over 200,000 or something like that? Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So you figure, you take that same trajectory, right, and you put it into the efforts for 2026, and you build that message, and you try to get these people on board to realize, like, hey guys, we're the same as you. Like, you know what I mean? We wouldn't be doing what we're doing if we didn't want change to happen.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think also, thinking ahead, having good candidates running, this next cycle, not only for governor, but also U.S. Senate. We'll have some strong U.S. House candidates as well, aside from, state rep and state Senate. So we have a lot of candidates kind of working to energize their base, their voters, and getting their vote out. And so I think it really, we could have like a, just really coming together to make some change.
I think so too. I think that, as I was saying earlier, a lot of the people that subscribe to the channel, they're they were once Democrats, and now they're switching parties.
Yeah.
And it's really crazy to see. I'm not surprised that it's happening, but I'm surprised at the fact that people, it's bad when people want information. Right? And they want to be educated on something. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because otherwise they won't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But whether it's their, coworker or family member or whatever it is, they see what's going on. And then they're like, wow, this is really happening here. How could we make a change? And that is what I think I could see happening in 2026.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One more last question for you, because we're almost at an hour. You want to talk about your biggest accomplishment as chair so far?
I think the biggest accomplishment is really getting the Republican message in the news. And, it's not a week goes by that the media is not talking about some issue that we're putting out there.
Yeah.
So that's changing the dialogue and the debate, and we are even seeing it in some cases change policy. And we're seeing the governor and the administration on the defensive on a lot of these issues and kind of reacting to things we're putting out, whether it would be, kind of Band-Aid solutions on our migrant policy, kind of too little, too late, but at least she's reacting to us. And so, I really kind of take that as a big accomplishment as a small party that, again, 3 years ago was really kind of embroiled in infighting and debt and, lots of legal problems. It was a low for us 3 years ago. I'll say that. And we've come a long way. And now we're at a point where we are actually influencing policy on Beacon Hill and influencing debate and dialogue, helping to recruit candidates for the future. And so we're positioning the party for future growth. And so that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Okay. You want to wrap it up there?
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. It was great having you on.
Yeah, great to be on. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.